Welcome to The Independent Musician. Our weekly podcast will focus on the independent artist and the music market at large. You'll hear from those artists as well as music execs, tech experts, and marketing leaders from around the globe. We'll discuss what it takes to make it in the biz and how you can overcome obstacles as you progress your craft, all the while making it interesting and fun. Now, here's your host, Mark Skoda.
All right, this is Mark Skoda. This is another episode of The Independent Musician. I have with me Mark Anthony from the Mark Anthony Ensemble. And we're going to talk a little bit about his career today, spend some time about why people do music, and certainly, hopefully, his insights will help you do so. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me, as always.
So, I'd like to start out. Give us a little background on who Mark Anthony is and some of your sort of history in terms of where you came from and how you got to Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah, great question. I've got a longer story to tell than most because I'm a little older. Naturally, I'm not.
Yeah, you and I both, by the way, Mark. We're both there.
Definitely not a newcomer to Nashville. And as you know, making up for a lot of lost time. But I came here in '87 to pursue my songwriting and to become eventually an artist. But the goal was to get here and pursue a specific industry with a specific goal in mind. And things were going well at that time. I got on local television, then I got on national television. Everything was going good until my ex-wife became pregnant with my oldest child. And that's when, the wheels came to a grinding halt. And I had higher priorities at that time, and that was to raise a family, be home, be a husband, be a father. And I did a very good job of that for the next 20 years and literally just disappeared from all the progress I had made up to that point, disappeared and followed my higher priority that time and didn't come back to pursue anything musical until I had almost reached retirement age. And had decided at that point that I've got time again, and I'm going to recapitulate on everything I had done and had been writing all those years. It's not like I was doing nothing, but I didn't have an outlet for it because, like I said, I had higher priorities at that time for all those years until my kids were grown and I could return to those original aspirations. And that's what I've been doing since 2019. And as you know, when I came to Iron Gate, I had already formed my band. I already had my band in place. I had been playing out. It was a working band, doing basically all the repertoire I had stored away for some 30 years. And
so when did you start playing guitar? Obviously, I know you're a guitar player as well. How long have you been singing, writing, and obviously you came to Nashville to begin the trek on a potential professional career, and life gets in the way. That's the reality all the time. Yeah. Life does get in the way, and yet you obviously had a passion for music. How did that begin? Where did that start from?
It began on a field trip on a bus when I was in high school. There was a guy that pulled out an acoustic guitar, and he had everybody singing along and playing, and I sat there in the back seat saying, I want to do what that guy's doing. That looks like fun. And I went out and bought a cheap, I don't know, at that time, Suzuki, the same people who make the motorcycles.
Right.
I went to a music store and I bought a Suzuki guitar. I think it cost me $30. And then I just started listening. I had a natural ear for music. I wasn't classically trained as a musician, and I had a natural ear and started just listening to albums at that time, Creedence Clearwater, Rolling Stones, Beatles, all that stuff, and learned my basic chords from then, and then just started emulating other people and other people's styles, what I had heard, and kind of formed my own style at that time. Later on, as the years went by, I went to college and took one semester of classical guitar training, which gave me just enough theory to be dangerous. Right?
That's right.
Still wasn't considered myself a trained musician at that point, but just took that as an interest and developed that technique, combined that with my previous technique, and that came up with I came up with my own finger style that I use nowadays, which was a culmination of all those years of ear training and a little bit of classical guitar training in college.
So basically, you started off. You love the fandom. I mean, like so many artists, right?
Oh yeah.
They begin by just this whole idea of entertaining, getting
Right.
somebody to listen to you. No, and
Correct.
I think that's really interesting because so many people sort of envision this idea of playing before the crowds, and sometimes those crowds may be two or three or four people, or the back of a school bus, right?
Yeah.
And the influence of music. What is so fascinating to me always about music in particular, and why so many people do it, is not only because making music is great, but it also informs sort of the emotion of people. It is a place where you can touch their soul, touch their mind, touch their heart, and they respond. They respond by singing together, by sort of joining in and even dancing, etc. So
Yep.
being a musician, and it's kind of interesting that basically the fandom sort of inspired you to pick up that Suzuki guitar. Now I have to tell you, you also don't sound like a motorcycle when you play. I want to be very clear. You've actually done a pretty good job of learning the craft, so everybody understands that. That's kind of interesting story. I didn't know Suzuki made guitars, but
Yeah.
that's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's a long time ago, so I'm sure they probably don't make them anymore. But that's how I started. And then when I graduated college, my parents gave me acoustic guitar of my choice, and I went out and went to a real nice music store. I remember it was in New Haven, Connecticut, and picked out a Loprenzi guitar. And at that time, nobody really knew who those guys were. They were two Italian brothers that broke off from C.F. Martin.
Oh,
And
wow.
they both, each brother had a specialty. One guy was a specialist in making the steel string guitar. The other guy was a specialist in the classical string. And they combined to form the Loprenzi Guitar Company. And I was lucky enough to get one of their Dreadnought basic models that they had at that time. And that baby has been with me for all these years. And of course, from that time that it was new to what it is now, all that wood has seasoned and aged, and it's a wonderful sounding instrument. People, when they see it, from a distance and they look at the peg head, it resembles a Martin because those guys worked for Martin.
Right,
But
right.
it has its own distinctive kind of scrolly shape at the top. And every once in a while, it was a popular guitar in the Northeast. When I moved here, nobody knew what a Loprenzi is because a Loprenzi up there is like a Taylor down here.
Yeah.
So every once in a while, someone would come up to me at a writer's night or writer show, and they'd go, "Oh, is that a Loprenzi?" And I'd go, "Oh, you know about these guitars." So it was kind of an avant-garde guitar company then. And still to this day, once in a while, people will appreciate it and they'll say, "Oh, you got a Loprenzi."
Yeah, are they still doing business today? Are they
No,
still
no,
making-
they
Long
stopped
time ago,
making
huh?
guitars, gosh, decades ago. So literally the guitar I have now is a collector's item, and I take a lot of pride in that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So you came down to Nashville. Obviously, you wanted to sort of make it like so many people who come to Nashville and start writing, and you kept writing even during the time of bringing up a family. And of course, just a few years ago, as we met, you had been sort of building your ensemble and beginning to do some new music. And of course, I was interested in what you were doing, and one of the reasons we signed you to the label. You've produced some great music. I think some of the things you're doing now as you've evolved the band, frankly, as well as the production quality has really changed as well. There has been an evolution in your music, both in terms of quality as well as your band itself, I think. And I think that is demonstrated in just what you've been doing recently. I mean, you've got a couple of TV interviews, you've been playing live on a number of gigs, but even on TV, I think that's great to hear. But tell us a little bit about that evolution of the ensemble to where you are today, and in particular, how you sort of evolved the band.
Yeah, like lots of other people, I paid my dues. I played the Bluebird. I did countless numbers of writers' shows. And
So
as the
I'm
years went,
going to stop you there. You played
Yeah.
the Bluebird. How did you get to play the Bluebird? Everybody asks me all the time, how do I play the Bluebird in Nashville? How do I get into the Bluebird? So tell me a little bit about that. Tell the audience how you do that.
gosh, it is a process. I was here and I was working a full-time job. I was in the engineering field at the time, and I did what everybody else did. You must play the Bluebird. If you're going to be anybody, you're going to be a songwriter, you must be there. So I went there and stood in line like everybody else. They had a designated night that you go there to do your audition, and if they deemed you good enough after you stood in line for hours, right, and you'd get to do your 2 songs, they would give you a little card and they'd say, here's your return date to actually come here and perform for the first time.
Okay.
And that first time would be anywhere from 8 months to the next 10 months in the future. Right.
Oh, gosh.
That's how backlogged they were. So you did it because, that was your one chance. So the 8 months would go by, your one chance for fame, and you show up and you do your writer's show. And that's only with the people that have gotten this little card. Right.
Mm-hmm, right.
And you waited 8 months for that chance. So on that night, if they think that you are deserving of a return visit, they give you another card and you wait another 8 months, 6 months, whatever it is until you get to do it again. But this time, now you're in a little bit more of a higher status. And so my second time around, I got to do it in the round with a couple of other notable songwriters. And so that meant a lot to me because now I was more in a featured status, if you will,
sure, right.
At the Bluebird. So I did all of that. And then, I just made a steady diet of writer shows until I got to that point, like we discussed, where I disappeared. And then I pursued my career, did my family, and lots of years went by. And when I got back to the point where I could do music again, I just didn't want to go that route.
Sure,
writer shows where, you must do writer shows when you come here new. But if you've been here for years and years and you've done that, to me, it was just, kind of a waste of time. I don't want to sign up at 6 o'clock with 40 other people, wait for your 2 songs. They rush you on, they rush you off. I thought, you know what? All that time's gone by. I'll just form my own band and have fun doing it, come what may. So I designed the band to be literally a live demo of all of my music.
Right.
And didn't care what the outcome was going to be. I was just going to have fun doing it, knowing I wasn't going to be in those constraints of the writer show and sign up on a list. You get to play your 2 songs at 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock when everybody's gone, and gone to bed. I thought, I'm just going to do this. So when I got to Iron Gate Records, as you remember, when the former A&R person had discovered me, I was already, I had a working band. And I was just having fun showcasing my material out there to wherever I could get into play and do a full band accompaniment as a singer-songwriter. And now that has evolved. The band's evolved to different players. I started out, that ensemble started really literally as a duo with myself on acoustic guitar and a wonderful dobro player that I had played over the years with. And it was just an acoustic duo.
Right.
Then we added a cajon player that provided a little bit of background percussion, a little bit of rhythm to it. Then we added a bass player. And all of a sudden it started to sound like a band to me. And I thought, this is cool. This is what I've always wanted to do, is form a band around my music. Then we changed the percussion into a full kit drummer. Then that drummer changed to another drummer. Then the bass player changed to another bass. I knew that the ensemble was always going to be a moving target. It was going to be different people at different times, but always the focus was going to be on me as an artist and my music. So you're right. It has evolved to better and better players. I have found a winning combination with a recording studio here in town called the Noise Floor, and that production has just been amazing. So I'm going to keep with that formula, and we can talk about that some, about what's happening.
I think that's an important point. First of all, I think it's interesting, of course, that you did this because you love music first and foremost. I think so many people, if you're doing this to be famous, you're probably going to be disappointed. That doesn't mean that you don't play for those 10 or 20 people in that front row sitting in a local pub or perhaps small venue that you're playing, because the inspiration that young man in the back of a school bus had for you created your desire for music to learn. And I think every artist really has that opportunity to present their talent and potentially inspire some young man, some young woman, or even a child to say, I want to do that someday. Because the music business, as you pointed out, is tough, right? Those callbacks 8 months later. I mean, and by the way, the Bluebird Cafe is a small hole in the wall joint as well. It's not it's kind of interesting because people have this vision of it sort of being this magnificent place, and it's really not. But having said that, it's just a cool place to go. It's got a great vibe. And I think to your other point you made, as you sort of had to take the hiatus because of your family situation, you decided to come back and rebuild. And never losing that passion for the music is critical, because ultimately, even a person who is older, having gone through sort of life's foibles or changes, can still begin to use their talents, their desire, and their passion to build on that in the future as well, whether that's as a singer-songwriter or as you've done, put the band together, bring the guys together. And I think I've noticed, certainly in your music, as I mentioned, and you've found a recording studio with a good engineering staff and a great producer. The quality now of those musicians and the sound of your music is much better as well because of the quality of the venue that you're recording at and producing. So I think, to your credit, you also recognize that, but you've also had to suffer a little bit because at the end of the day, those are financial commitments that you had to make in order to bring your craft up to a level that was satisfying to you. Isn't that right?
Yeah, the first 6 recordings, not to demean those at all. It's just that, when you're starting out and you're recording your music, I mean, I would love to record every song I've written over 30 years, but not every songwriter can afford to do that. So the first 6 were ones of convenience in a sense, because the guitar player in the band at that time, we have a different guitar player now, a wonderful player from South Africa named Peter Kapp. But at that time, the guitar player had his own recording studio. So on a bare bones budget, we did those first 6. And you do what you can do, what you can afford to do at that time. And then I decided to step it up from there when I did my last 3 singles. But, to your point earlier, and I'm not saying that to aspire to stardom is not a bad thing. I mean, before I ever came here, gosh, I warmed up. I had my own country rock band back in the Northeast. We played for over 5,000 people as a warm up for Louise Mandrell. And that was at that point in my life. I had played through college. Yeah. But when I got to do that gig, that was the biggest thrill in my life. When I got in front of that audience, was able to entertain and perform in front of them, I said, man, I'd love to do this the rest of my life. Right. But that doesn't always happen. Those kind of gigs don't happen. So to your point, I'll retract and I'll just say this. The book of Jeremiah says that before you were formed in your mother's womb, God knew you. He knew that he had an intimate plan for your life. And God has that for everybody. I just happen to have musical talent. So I've tried to use that to the best of my ability. And to me, the bottom line question is, what is success for a musician? What's success mean for Mark Anthony? What does success mean for every other aspiring singer-songwriter that's out there? Well, for me, what it always meant was, bottom line this: if I can bring a smile to a few people's faces, if somebody's out there that appreciates my music, I've achieved success. Now, if God is ready to open up that door and make it something bigger, I've always been ready to step through it. And if not, it's still okay, because I am working my craft to what I feel success is for me. Now, for someone else, it might be that they feel like success isn't there until you're on a stage in front of 500,000 people. Well, okay. But you know what? A lot of us are probably not going to get there. So what I would say to everybody else is, whatever your craft is, and it may not be music, it may be accounting, it may be engineer, whatever your gift, your niche is, I say this: attack it early in life. Don't wait till you got to be maybe middle-aged like me before you finally decided what it is you want to do in life as a career. For me, I had 2 careers. I went back to college when I was almost 50 years old to pursue what I really wanted to do. And I left the engineering field and wanted to do something more creative with my life, because I've always had that creative bent, right? Sure. As a musician. Sure. I became an interior designer and did that for the last 12 years of my second career. But I would say to people, and that's an inspiration to some folks. They hear that story, they go, wow, if that guy can do that while he's raising a family and he's working full time. I say to people, no, don't do it the way I did. I told my kids the same thing. Find out what your talent is, what your niche is, what your heart bent is early in life, and attack it early when you've got youth on your side, when you're not tied down by a bunch of other constraints.
Yeah, but wait a minute. I want to be very clear. We're both older guys. I'm a little older than you, okay? The point is, you don't want to give up. And of course, here you are. You're on local TV now, a couple of different channels. You're going to be, I think you're recording another hit over in Chattanooga because the sister station here in Nashville liked you. I've watched you play live. Honestly, one of the things about music, and particularly the band, I don't go to anybody to watch some guy up there with a computer, right? So bands really are enjoyable when you have a festival or you have a gig. And
Yeah.
your band really plays well. You guys are tight. You had fun. We certainly did that park event, which was really good. And I realize that's outdoor and it's hard to hear the acoustics, but you guys really performed well and you sounded like a band and you got up there and you were animated. And I think that's really important for everybody to understand. Yes, you are an older, quote unquote, musician, but you're still pursuing an effort to make people smile, to have fun yourself. Hopefully, get enough money to keep sustaining this habit while you're doing other things. And that's also, in this day and age, necessary, unfortunately.
Right.
And the music business is tough. It's getting tougher because, I talk to people all the time. They want a big deal. They want a big label. But the big labels are changing the deal structure as well. They're taking a piece not only of streaming now, they used to make their money on album sales from their artists. Well, they don't make that money anymore. So what are they doing?
Yeah.
They're now taking money not only from streaming, they're taking money from gigging, they're taking money from merchandise sales. So those old 360 deals are becoming 360 and a half, right? Because they have to make more money. They're taking your publishing, they're taking your catalog. And I think one of the things that I started when I established Iron Gate Records, and we've talked about this before, is you own your streaming, you own your publishing, you own your merchandise.
Yep.
And everything we do is really as a service fee only, because we want the artist to embrace and to own all their own intellectual property and their talent, and to support that. And I think, to your point, the last thing you need to begin doing as a individual coming back into the music business several years ago is to get locked into something that restricts those 30 years of experience, and suddenly you're giving away all of your talent and all of your work. And that is really important for any artist listening today, to figure out, more importantly, how do you own your catalog? Because, and I say this very clearly, if you have that one hit, your catalog is worth more. And if you know what's going on in the industry today, big labels are buying legacy catalogs because they can monetize that. And ultimately, artists need to own their intellectual property. And their intellectual property is their songs, their publishing. And that is critical in today's environment, because it doesn't mean you're going to have a catalog that's valuable in the future. But I assure you, if you give it up, you'll have nothing left that you can rely on in the future should you be successful.
Yeah, to your point earlier, don't get me wrong. I'm a firm believer in the colloquialism that says if you do nothing, nothing will happen.
Exactly.
You've got to take whatever talent you have, whatever resources you have, money and otherwise, and you've got to persevere. You cannot give up. I certainly haven't. I mean, look at where I'm at now, and I certainly haven't given up over all those years. But you've got to be doing your part all that time. You've got to persevere. And yeah, I get discouraged like everybody else. You put in all this effort. You make phone calls. You send emails. You try to promote. You do all that stuff, and you get zero response in return. A lot of times, it does get depressing, and plenty. Motivation to say, hey, I'm just going to throw in the towel and give up. No, you can't do that. If God is giving you a dream, you've got to pursue it. But yeah, you've got to do your part. And I'm fortunate. I'm blessed because, one of the things that attracted me to Iron Gate Records, and you explained it so succinctly, that when I came to Iron Gate, with all that catalog of music that I had written over all the years, I loved the fact that I was on an independent label, but that my authorship, my publishing, because I am a publishing company as well, Mark Anthony Music, is that I retained all of that and was given the freedom and flexibility to fly now with new wings, but not have any of that ownership taken away from me. And I love that. I think that's really attractive about being with an independent label. But I am blessed in the fact that, when I came on a little over a year ago, my music has definitely evolved from that, production wise and otherwise. And now in the last month, I've had the opportunity to be on television, not once, not twice, but now 3 times. And we're going to capitalize on all 3 of those appearances. I'll be going to Chattanooga next Friday to appear on Fox 17's sister station down there, Channel 9, WVCT TV, I believe it is, Channel 9, Chattanooga. And they want me to come down on their show called The Daily Refresh. And they got their recommendation from Eric Dahl's Rock and Review show, which will be aired. I taped that on December 15th. It will be aired on January 27th, I believe.
Right.
So all of these airings are yet to come out. Channel 4's came out last week, but I have just posted on social media on my band's Facebook page, Mark Anthony Ensemble, and on my personal page as well. I've given the links for Channel 4's Today in Nashville show. So that is now out. People can view it at any time.
Right. We've got to put that up on our sites as well for you, because I know you sent me those links as well. So we'll get that.
Yeah. So, things are happening. I haven't been on television, gosh, in all these years.
Well, this is why I do a podcast. You see, I've got a face for radio. That's my view. And at the end of the day, I just, make sure that I have just the audio podcast being generated. But, and of course you just got lucky. I mean, somebody just called you up because they said, come on TV, we want you to do this, right, Mark? You got a call out of the blue. That's how you got that opportunity. Isn't that right?
Yeah, but where it all started was at Tomato Festival, strangely enough. And I went to the Channel 4 booth and I inquired about their local show, and they put me in touch with the right person, and I gave them my story. They were intrigued enough by the story to give me a shot and schedule me. But that took another, whatever it was, 6 months, 8 months from that time,
right,
to get on Today in Nashville. Today in Nashville spurned another visit. Then Eric Dahl's Fox 17 show. Literally, I had been talking to Eric for almost 3 years, the 3 years that I had formed my band. And funny, when he and I talked in his office the day we met, he said, Mark, one of the reasons I had to put you on my show was your perseverance and your tenacity. We had talked for 3 years. And as soon as I found out that you were going to appear on our competitor station, then he said, hey, Mark, that's awesome. What's your schedule like for December? And so it came about immediately, not because of, he was trying to beat somebody else, but because the first one came about as a result of perseverance.
I think that's important.
To other visits,
and that's really important, because at the end of the day, I was sort of facetious when I said you just got this call out of the blue. You have been working these efforts for quite a long time, and a lot of artists don't realize that it's not just about getting your music written, produced, and released. It's the subsequent efforts. And look, we don't do all of that. We're adding, as you know, the whole public relations piece, and I've just put up all of our services, a bunch of new services we've launched here in January. It's exciting to me. But at the end of the day, the artist has to do their job, right? You have to make those calls, and you have to continue to make those calls. 3 years, people say, well, Mark, I don't want to wait 3 years. Well, the fact of the matter is, maybe that's what it's going to take until you finally get now inside of a month, 3 TV interviews where you get to play your music and share your story and hopefully inspire not just 1 or 2 people, but hundreds to thousands of people who get to hear that. That's a remarkable opportunity, and a lot of people would love to be doing that.
Yeah, I got to say something about that 3 years, because I got to meet Eric. What a wonderful man. And he was so gracious as a host. And 3 years, yeah, it was kind of depressing, where I got turned down time after time. But, I took a look at that show, and he's had on that show Dolly Parton, Kenny Rogers, George Thorogood, Peter Frampton, Clint Black, Trisha Yearwood. The list goes on and on. And now added to that list is Mark Anthony. That is no small feat. Was it worth 3 years? Yes. I would say in my case, being a relatively unknown independent artist, it was worth all that effort. And when he sat and looked at me face to face in his office and said, it was your tenacity, it was your perseverance, I just had to put you on the show. And so, yeah, it was worth it. And, hopefully singer-songwriters don't have to work at something 3 years before something pays off. But this paid off in dividends. And now I can proudly say we've added Mark Anthony to that list of all those great people. I'm in company of those people. And I feel like, wow, sometimes I feel like I can't hold a candle to people like that. But you know what? I'm getting my due share because of tenacity, because of perseverance, and because of me working my craft. And to your point earlier, sometimes we go down an avenue. Like for me, I'm very actively working at getting my band gigs, right? So that we're out there more visible. Sometimes when one avenue doesn't work, it's okay to lay something down and pursue another avenue while you're working your craft. In this case, it was television. And, with 3 TV appearances in 1 month, I haven't gotten a single gig, but those 3 TV appearances are probably going to net a lot more in work for the band and in gigs than it would be if I was on the phone trying to get into a local bar. Right.
Well, that's right, because now you can add that to your sort of a repertoire and also in your promotion campaigns.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, that should become part of your EPK and
yes,
as appeared on, and you have links to the videos, and generally those videos are maintained by the stations for a number of years. If not,
right.
you need to download, use an application and download the video so you have it permanently.
Right.
Because I did a lot of TV back in the early 2000s, and some of that's still out there, but ultimately it does go away.
Yeah.
And I think to your point about perseverance and tenacity, that's really what you have to have in the music business today. And as it is critical for everybody to understand that overnight success does happen, but very seldom. Nashville particularly is a tough place because we have so many singer-songwriters and so many performers. We've got, the changes that are going on, frankly, down on Broadway. Some of these are not to the benefit because we're seeing older establishments who were historically part of the music scene go away because the cost of real estate is such.
Right.
We just saw the Exit Inn now close its doors and probably becoming a hotel. And I think people need to look beyond Nashville as well. And I think in particular, I've been watching a few of our Iron Gate artists in the Carolinas, and they are working their back tails off because there is so much interest in particularly country music in those two states, and the venues are remarkable in terms of the amount of music. And I have to say, I believe what's beginning to occur post-pandemic is more venues are beginning to figure out that in order to benefit their businesses, they need to provide live entertainment, and that live entertainment really not only helps their business, but also creates the social environment that, people are looking for. I mean, how much more can we do basically, social media on an app before we get tired of never actually contacting a human being? And music is a communal effort. Music itself is not just streaming a song, flipping through it. It is really about experiencing the entire environment where you're playing and performing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a great point. And as far as Nashville goes, don't get me wrong, I'm still pursuing local venues because I think that's where you need to start, right? As a local artist, start locally. But I have found out, like in 2022, and I take a look at where my band's played, we've had more success and more of a receptive atmosphere when we've gone outside of Nashville. Looking ahead to 2023, I'm hoping that this band is going to be able to go out of state as well and do some gigs and some concerts in other states. We've already had some inroads in Florida and Illinois, and I hope to do some more traveling, not just wider exposure for the band, but you can't have such a narrow focus when you're here in Nashville where there is just a glut, right? There's only so many venues to play with 10,000 people trying to get into 10 venues, right? You got to be realistic and say it's okay to play Nashville once in a while, but when you go outside of Nashville and you're still billed as a Nashville artist, I'm still an independent recording artist and can hold on to that notoriety. Right. That's recognized when you go outside of Nashville. So I'm enjoying the opportunities to travel, not just in the state of Tennessee outside of Nashville, but looking ahead to 2023, we hope that we're going to be able to go out of state to Kentucky, Alabama, in this region as well, and get the name and the Mark Anthony brand around a little bit more.
Well, I think that's one of the things, I've been focusing on, as you know, Mark, for a while now, and we'd gone through several people on the booking agency side, but I finally I am paying a full-time person who is going to be managing the booking agency. And one of the other things I'm looking at as a label is to create an independent festival for artists here in Nashville. I look at things like Pilgrimage and certainly Bonnaroo, huge festivals, corporate festival. I mean, it's $350 for a ticket for a couple of days.
Right.
This is not for the average individual. They've become so corporatized. Now, to be sure, they got some great bands. So we're looking at sort of doing something for the independent artist, more of a family-oriented event, something that's low cost, and do that at a full sort of park outdoor setting that will be very well received. And I think, those are kinds of things that need to happen. We need to see more independent festivals where bands can play and exhibit their craft, and also do it at a cost for the attendees that makes more sense. You know, it's we're working on it. Hopefully it'll work out. We'll see, but hopefully hold something towards the end of this year, September date timeframe, and we'll see how that works out. I am passionate about the independent artist, as you know. That's why I started the label.
Yep.
I'm passionate about the independent artist being able to get the assistance and everything from the technology platform to the marketing services, to the public relations services, to publishing, to gigging, all the sorts of things that a label needs to support its artists. And I do so in a programmatic fashion. But the most fun I have, quite frankly, is doing like what we're doing now, is meeting artists, meeting different people, hearing about their aspirations and their music, listening to their music. You know, we don't just bring anybody on board. In fact, today I'm going to be doing a Zoom call next week with an Italian rock band. These guys are killer. I mean, I just was amazed when I got this notification, and I woke up this morning and listening to their music. So we'll talk to them more. And of course, we signed a international artist in Portugal, and it's really fun for me as an executive within the label to sort of work with people like yourself and hear these stories and recognize that, you know what, music is not only diverse in terms of the sound and genre, but the stories of the musicians, the stories of the artists, and the aspirations that everyone has, and frankly, some who give up too soon. You know, it's the old adage, they snatch defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yeah, so true.
And to your point about perseverance and tenacity, and here you are. And yeah, we joke a little bit about we're a little bit older, but you know what? You still got your vocal chops. You still can play your instrument, and that's better than a football career. Okay.
You know, one thing that you impressed upon me, and I'll say this before I make this statement. I hope I speak for all the artists that are on the label, but you are a master at constantly reinventing the label and coming up with new initiatives. And I think everybody appreciates that about you and about Iron Gate, is that, you know, you don't sit back on your laurels and try to imitate what some other label is doing. You're always coming up with new and innovative ways to promote each artist, looking for new artists, all that's it, growing the label, growing the band, not only from the technology side. Now you've got booking going, it's all the stuff, the podcast, the radio station, and we all appreciate that. I know I do. I'm looking forward to big things, of course, with this booking agent, because that's a huge part and a big benefit for any artist when they're on a label, because typically that's not part of a record label's services.
Right.
So looking forward to that. I think to your point earlier about, you know, this band, like over in Europe, you know, I'm Italian American descent, as you know. I'm really looking forward to hearing these guys, because these are my people, right?
I know. Like when I saw that, I saw the email. They have a gmail.it account, which I got such a kick out of, and I'm listening to these guys, and they're probably, I would guess, in their late 30s, early 40s, but they are kick ass. I mean, they are really good and fun. And for me, it's, you know, because we have a global reach. I mean, for instance, our booking agency, right? We're adding another 35,000 venues. We'll have 115,000 venues that we can contact, and there's more functionality coming through on the technology. And then, of course, our services now are global. We actually have aligned ourselves with a major public relations firm, which will allow us to do things worldwide, with offices in Europe as well as the United States. I'm excited about that. And so I'm constantly, because, you know, as you know, I spent 13 and a half years of my life overseas and living in 6 and working in about 60 different countries. And so for me, international is just a part of what the label should be doing. You know, we're looking at some very cool things, by the way. I'll share on this podcast. We're looking at creating some sub-labels within Iron Gate, one for country, one for rock, maybe one for Americana. Not in the sense that there'll be any distinct elements of, they'll all be under the Iron Gate label, but they will be within genre-specific label names. So we'll be able to create something that maybe is segments, you know, our artists more clearly, and that way we can get more benefit out of promoting those. It's an Iron Gate Records label subset, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm looking at different ways, because we are getting, you know, a lot of different artists in different genres, and so it's one of the things you mentioned, the radio show. One of the things I'm looking at doing is putting together a country show and a rock show, and then we'll schedule that so that the artists that are rock or country are only played during a certain 1 or 2 hours. One of the things that I want to do, and I've been not successful yet, but we will this year, is to get some live DJs so people can actually talk about. And, you know, even our artists can potentially do a spin and do a show, for instance. So there's lots going on in the background here. I'm glad you first of all, I appreciate your comments about Iron Gate and what I'm trying to do, because the technology itself for me is critical for the artist, because the artist has to really focus on their music. Yeah, they have to focus on getting their message out through that music, and then ultimately they have to work alongside the label to build their repertoire, to build their reputation, and ultimately their success. So it is fun for me to do this, and I find that so many people don't take technology to the level that I do, largely because they don't have a tech background, or they don't respect the technology to the extent of helping. The old days of just shaking a hand and getting a deal done, particularly for smaller independent labels, just doesn't get done anymore.
Yeah.
As you all know. And I think the big labels right now, they're very selective. And so my view is there's this Iron Gate really is one of those things that, from my point of view, helps our artists in a way that is low risk to them, low risk to their careers, but at the same time potentially has high rewards. And ultimately, I'd love to have somebody just break out and maybe a big machine group come to me and say, Mark, let's collab on this particular artist. So it's a lot of fun.
Yep.
It's a lot of fun. So where are you going next?
Keep everybody.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, you keep everybody well informed about the initiatives through the emails, keep everybody up to date. I've known about some of the stuff that's going on with your, the factions that you're going to split off. And that's really great news for an artist like me, because as you know, I don't fit a mold, a particular mold. I came here for country, very frankly, but I found out right away with the music that I write that I was not going to fit exactly this mold. And, to me, the true definition of being an artist is being true to yourself. And I've never written a song that has to fit a formula, right, or has to fit a time frame, or has to have certain lyrics and certain slogans in it. I write from the heart, right? Whatever comes out of my heart. And so my stuff, because I came from the pretty music, the California era of the 70s and 80s, which was Eagles, Dan Fogelberg, Poco, James Taylor, Logs and Messina, pretty melodies, good harmonies, but good it was acoustic music with a rock edge.
Yes.
And nowadays we call that Americana. And so I don't exactly fit the country mold, but I don't fit the rock and roll mold. I'm somewhere lost in the middle of all that. Right. And I take pride in that, because that defines who I am. It's a little bit of this, it's a little bit of that, but I'm going to stay true to myself and not try to sound like someone else, try to fit someone else, some other industry's definition of what success is by fitting into their mold. I know there's a market for what I do as an Americana artist, and I'm glad that Iron Gate Records recognizes the uniqueness of that, and that I'm on your label, and that they haven't discarded me because of that uniqueness. And that says a lot about the character of the label. So I'm happy to be.
Mark, as we're sort of winding down here, I'd love to hear your thoughts on as sort of a gentleman who's been around a while, what you would tell younger artists starting up. We just signed a young man, Garrett Huffman. He's 19 years old. I think he's probably one of our youngest, other than my son's band, of the youngest artists on the label. I will tell you, he's working harder than any guy I've seen. He's doing 3 shows a weekend. And he only picked up his guitar 2 years ago during the pandemic. And he's writing some very cool music. So he clearly has an innate talent. But there are other people out there like that. What do you tell young people who are looking to aspire to music generally? What's your advice?
Yeah, everything that we have talked about summed up in a few short statements. Be true to yourself as an artist. Believe in what it is that you do. Don't give up. Set realistic goals, I would say. And as you're pursuing those, if one avenue doesn't work, don't give up. Pursue, another approach to it. Have a different plan than just plan A in place. Have plan B, have plan C. But bottom line, believe in the talent that God has given you, because if you believe in that, and you're pursuing your dreams, God's going to honor that. And whatever success means to a particular industry, don't be defined by that. Be defined by what success means to you. And that's different for everybody. I discussed what it means for Mark Anthony. It may be different for another musician, but I'm happy at what I'm going to do. For 2023, my sights are set on recording more of my music, getting the band higher visibility out there. I'm just going to continue to follow the formula that I've done since I formed the Mark Anthony Ensemble. And that may be small potatoes to someone else, but I'm enjoying what I'm doing because I get feedback from social media. It brings smiles to a lot of people's faces. People message me and they say, man, I loved that last song. Some lady messaged me yesterday. She heard The Mystery, which, is kind of a different avenue for me.
I like that. Would you release right around Christmas time?
It's different genre for me, but they put it out there. And this woman just wore me out saying, you've got to contact Kelly Clarkson, sing that song with her. She made it sound like, oh, sure, I can just get online and contact
Hello, Kelly. Hey, I got a great song we should sing
together,
right?
Oh, it's that easy, right? But, it was encouraging that someone got so much inspiration out of it to encourage me, back to me, to say, keep doing what you're doing. I love it. And so, what that means to me as a singer-songwriter is, wow, somebody out there enjoyed my music enough for me to get another little bit of encouragement to keep on keeping on. And that's what you got to do.
Great. Mark, we're going to leave it there for the day. Listen, I am going to play us out on The Mystery because I think that's a good song we should play. So thanks so much for your time, and we'll play it out. Here's The Mystery by Mark Anthony Ensemble.
Love it. Thank you, man.
He knelt down to find an answer. His hands were folded quietly in prayer. He was praying for a reason from the depths of his despair. Then he heard the words of Jesus. He asked of him, and this was his reply. Oh, Jesus, where can I find you in a world untrue? If you're looking for me, the Lord to come into his heart. It's an overwhelming feeling when you find the missing part. And though he tries to understand it, can't deny the mystery of faith. Oh, Jesus, where can I find you in a world untrue? If you're looking for me, I live in you. Well, your sins have been forgiven. You were once in chains, but now you're free. And your spirit lives inside you. That is Christ the mystery. you